Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalam ala ashrafil anbiya'i wal mursaleen wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Honorable Dr. Muhammad Azman Sharifuddin Tunku Ibrahim, Chairman, Board of Directors, University of Malaya, Honorable Professor Dr. Muhammad Riza bin Wahiddin, Vice Chancellor, University Science Islam Malaysia, Honorable Professor Dr. Sri Dr. Zaleha bint Kamaruddin, former Rector, International Islamic University Malaysia, Honorable Professor Emeritus Dr. Uthman Bakar, Al-Ghazali Chair of Epistemology and Civilizational Studies, ISTAC IAUM, Deputy Rectors, Deans, Deputy Deans, Professors, respected colleagues, honored guests, ladies and gentlemen. I am pleased to welcome you all this morning to the webinar on the present state of Muslim leadership in knowledge advancement, a critical assessment organized by the International Institute of Islamic Thought, ISTAC, International Islamic University, IIUM, Kuala Lumpur. International Institute of Islamic Thought and Civilization is dedicated to engaging in advanced level study and research about Islamic thought and civilization at national and global levels to nurture comparative, cultural, and civilizational studies devoted to the renewal of Islam and human civilization. Its mission is to produce a new breed of academics and scholars who are multilingual and multidisciplinary in their expertise, with knowledgeable understanding of the universal message of Islam for the advancement of Islamic thought and civilization, who can address new challenges and concerns facing the Muslim Ummah and humanity, which will enable meaningful living in the 21st century globalized world. In our webinar in April 2021, we discussed decolonization and Islamization of the social sciences. The topic was about knowledge issues. In the discussion, the panelists talked about many issues concerning the knowledge situation in contemporary Muslim society. Among other things, the panelists spoke about the impact of colonial rule on the state of education and knowledge in Muslim communities. They also talked about how decolonization and Islamization in the post-colonial era have helped improve the state of education and knowledge in Muslim societies. There is thematic continuity between the topic of the last webinar and the topic of today's webinar. The continuity is to be seen in the issue of knowledge. But today, we are going to look at the issue of knowledge from broader perspectives. We would like to have an overview of the present situation of the Muslims in the field of knowledge in general, not just in science and technology, or not just in the social sciences, or not just in the religious sciences. The topic to be discussed today is Muslim leadership in knowledge advancement. By knowledge advancement, we mean progress in knowledge activities in the following areas: the creation of new knowledge, application of new knowledge, dissemination and distribution of both old and new knowledge, and consolidation of established knowledge, such as through education. Thus, our concern is extensive. Although we cannot discuss all these aspects of knowledge activities in detail, we hope that the panelists will bring out the main issues that present-day Muslim societies face in these different aspects and suggest how these issues could be addressed. However, to help narrow the discussion of these issues a little bit, we will look at the issue of knowledge advancement by examining where and to what extent Muslims are playing leadership roles. So we are not really talking about Muslim political leadership in knowledge advancement, although this dimension of leadership is vital to its realization. Instead, we are interested in the present state of intellectual, academic, educational, and professional leadership. Hopefully, the panelists can provide us with some assessment on the four sectors of leadership: intellectual, academic, educational, and professional, concerning their roles, achievements, and impacts on society in the four areas of knowledge activities, that is, creation of new knowledge, new applications of knowledge, distribution of knowledge, and consolidation of knowledge. Hopefully, we also wish to be informed whether or not there is good news regarding Muslim leadership roles in certain areas of knowledge at the international level. We know that Muslim academics, scholars, scientists, and educationists internationally recognized for their achievements. But this is an area of knowledge advancement that has not been duly documented, especially concerning the leadership roles at the international level. We have the perception that compared to the so-called advanced societies in the West, Muslims lag behind in the field of knowledge, including in all the four areas of knowledge advancement that we are talking about. But we cannot depend on just perceptions. What we need is a well-documented assessment of the present state of Muslim leadership in advancement, in knowledge advancement, with the hope that weaknesses and shortcomings in the different areas could be effectively addressed by the sectors concerned and their respective stakeholders. For this reason, we have put forward a critical assessment as the subtitle of our webinar today. However, in talking about critical assessment of a subject like knowledge advancement, quite obviously, we have to be sensitive to the value-laden culture, to the value-laden nature of the issue. Knowledge as human activity has a cultural context, meaning a value dimension. Since we are talking about today's topic from the Islamic perspective, our conception of knowledge advancement has to be based on Islamic conceptions of knowledge and Islamic values of knowledge, creation, application, distribution, and consolidation. One of the main objectives of International Institute of Islamic Thought and Civilization in organizing the monthly webinars is to initiate discussions on various issues of great importance to the academic world and the general public. In particular, they are essential to postgraduate students. The issues raised could even help students in deciding on their topics of graduate research. We believe that the issues discussed need further elaboration, thus further research is necessary. Without taking much of your time, let me end my welcoming speech by thanking you all for your interest and participation in this webinar. We have 5 panelists. In fact, we have 4 panelists today. And the first panelist is Dr. Professor Tunku Muhammad Azman Sharifuddin. To give you a brief biodata of Tunku, he graduated from the University of Manchester with a bachelor degree in electrical engineering and master's and doctoral degrees in control systems. He first served as an academic at the Faculty of Engineering, University of Malaya, for 11 years. For the next 21 years, he was the founding director general and CEO of the Malaysian Institute of Microelectronic Systems, MIMOS. He led significant strategic national efforts in R&D and capacity building focused on ICT and microelectronics. As CEO of MIMOS, he also served for 9 years as the ex officio secretary of the National Information Technology Council, chaired by the Prime Minister of Malaysia. In this capacity, he was instrumental in the formulation and implementation of national ICT policies and strategies, in particular the Multimedia Super Corridor, MSC, and the National IT Agenda. He is a senior fellow, Academy of Sciences, Malaysia, where he is leading several projects to take S&T-based innovation forward. He is chairman, Board of Directors, University of Malaya, member, Board of Directors, Malaysia Today, Malaysia Torre Science Foundation, and member, Board of Directors, Pernek Integrated Network Systems, Sindiri and Berhad, a Malaysian IT company. He is a member of the New Club of Prairies. With this brief information on his achievements, may I respectfully call upon Tunku to deliver his speech on the theme, the present state of Muslim leadership in knowledge advancement. فليتفضل Tunku.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Thank you, Chairman. And I thank also ISTEC IIUM for inviting me to this event. Congratulations. It is a very important but big subject. I don't think we can cover all the issues in this session. So needless to say, we need to continue the conversation and narrow down on the key things and initiatives that we could do. To start off, let's just remember that the global system has moved into the knowledge economy and society many years ago, at least for the last half century. Most people may not recognize it, but it has been happening for the last 50 years, maybe longer. Currently, the knowledge economy and society has been accelerated through the use of information technology. So actually, it is moving faster and faster. And the content of ICT, the material that makes it move faster and faster is actually knowledge. Now, in this discussion, I will try to cover very briefly what it means to say knowledge. In the past, the meaning was different. It is now, in the modern world, quite different from the past. So we'll speak about knowledge first, in terms of its traditional meaning and the current modern meaning. Then I'll move on to my focus of discussion. I will say briefly why I'm speaking mainly on the subject of practical knowledge. So there are other aspects of knowledge, but in this discussion, I will focus on practical knowledge. And then we'll do a quick summary of where the Muslims are in terms of this kind of knowledge. And we will say a little bit about the key challenges. And finally, some points on the way forward. So with that, let me begin. Well, knowledge is a very important word in Islam because in the Quran, the word ilm or ilmu in Bahasa Melayu is repeated so many times. There are other words that are of equal significance. For example, the word ikra in the first verse revealed to the Prophet to read. And of course, to read, to understand what God has given us. In other words, very clearly, knowledge is not originating from humankind. It originates from the Creator. And the Creator has seen it as his rahmah to share a little bit of knowledge with humankind in order that humankind can fulfill. Of course, a significant idea that I always like to repeat is how God describes telling the angels about the creation of Adam. That he was given all the names of things. And certainly that creation of Adam disappointed the angels to the extent that they asked, why do you want to create a being that will cause havoc on earth? But God replied that actually you know something that I know something that you don't know. And that basically is that attribute of the human creation to have intellect, to be able to think, and of course to acquire knowledge. So knowledge advancement is part of the human mission. And of course, again, to go further into the subject, in the Quran, it says that Quran contains the ayats of creation, of course the Sunnatullah, in other words. It's also the source of the rules of creation, of the natural order, the natural world. It also contains the ayats, and in a few verses in the human self, the nafs. The human nafs also contain signs of God's creation. So there are three sources that are mentioned specifically in the Quran, to repeat, the natural world and in the human nafs. So this is sort of knowledge that the earlier Islamic scholars cultivated, what we call Tawhidic knowledge. The origin, obviously, from the Creator, the Allah, who has infinite knowledge. He created humankind who could recognize the innate attribute of humankind is to recognize the Creator. And that recognition comes mainly from acquisition of knowledge. Now, what happened after the early days? Well, the Muslim scholars cultivated, of course, this integrated system of knowledge. We could call it Tawhidic from the beginning. And of course, they applied the same kind of knowledge for what we call righteous living. That happened in the early part of Islam. And righteous living, of course, in the modern terminology meant quality of life was enhanced. So they cultivated this integrated knowledge that had both components of what we call today religious sciences as well as natural sciences. Now, what happened in the meantime? About 3 or 4 centuries ago, the modern world saw a new kind of worldview cultivated from the Western experience that started with the Western Enlightenment about the 16th century, and then it led to the scientific revolution, and thereon to the industrial revolution. And each phase of the Western experience separated knowledge from creation, from the original Creator. It became a materialistic world, deterministic as well, empirical, reductionist, of course, and of course, followed what we call the conception of evolutionism. So these are some of the characteristics of the current notion of knowledge, which are, by the way, alien to the Islamic tradition. So now, why am I focused on this narrow subject of practical knowledge? Practical knowledge is very important because this is the kind of knowledge that allows us to realize the vision of Islam. The worldview of Islam needs to be realized and actualized in human society and in the world at large. At the moment, we can say that because we have not done a very good job, that vision of Islam is not felt in the world, whether among the Muslims or even among, especially among the non-Muslims. Because the Muslims may be practicing Islam, but the righteous living, the concept of righteous living based on knowledge is not apparent. I would explain later if need be. Right? What we mean by this practical knowledge is that we need to actually understand how knowledge gets applied to produce value. In the certain people's terms, it's called innovation. Innovation means creation of value. It does not mean that you must make money. There are many innovations that do not make money, but they still have social or economic or cultural and civilizational value. These are all innovations. Now, there are processes to deal with this, but you must start with, of course, knowledge, new knowledge. You cannot invent something new if you do not have new knowledge. You cannot keep using old knowledge on its own and try to build a new kind of innovation. So what we mean here is what, as the chairman said, how do you actually find new knowledge? How do you apply new knowledge? How do you make the new knowledge work for society? So this is where I think we need to focus on something that has benefits for humankind, especially for Muslims and even the non-Muslims. Now, what does it mean actually? It means that we must maintain balance, harmony, and order. At the moment, there is enough evidence to show that the Western kind of knowledge development is leading to disorder and imbalance, disharmony. You can mention any number of current problems, including especially the current COVID crisis. It has been brought on simply because we have disturbed the natural order. And everybody is thinking of the next pandemic. There will be many, many more pandemics simply because we have actually reached certain limits. The same limits are being confronted as far as, say, the carbon emission is concerned, the greenhouse gases that are affecting our environment. The limits are also being seen in terms of the pollution we are producing everywhere. We do not recycle. We have plenty of waste. We don't know how to deal with them. They are toxic and poisonous. These are the limits that are being faced right now. So there are so many examples of this that show very clearly that we are actually practicing an unsustainable way of life. And this is because of wrongful use of knowledge. So let's talk about knowledge advancement now. It is actually driven, again, by the Western agenda. Not to say that the Western people have not produced good knowledge, but the basic ideology is, as said before, when you have a secular kind of knowledge, you do not have very strong ethical or moral grounds. You have human decisions, human ethics, which are not related to any, I call it absolute truth. It's all relative. Now, what does it mean actually? Of course, it projects the Western worldview. The Muslims in this condition are actually followers. Science and technology research to the Muslims are simply trying to catch up. And of course, in terms of all the factors that will make knowledge advancement, call it rapid and effective, we are very poor. Let's talk about simply, just mention quickly, funding, very little money. We can show evidence on that. The structure and organization of knowledge development, hardly anything, very poor. The talent pool, very short. We can show numbers for that. The legal framework for knowledge development is not there. And of course, integration, economic integration, social integration to produce impact for human beings and for society as a whole. So this is where I think the Muslims are clearly behind. I can show you numbers on Malaysia, which happens to be one of the better countries among the OIC member states. Even Malaysia is facing huge problems. We are not innovating as well as some of our peers, even in this region. Okay, let's talk about that mindset, culture, and civilization. I think one of the biggest difficulties is actually the will to lead. The will to lead does not seem to be there. So I'm making a big claim here, but let's see what other panel members think about it. So just move on to the key challenges. I want to mention just quickly 5 areas. The first challenge is actually the knowledge agenda, which I think has been hijacked by the reductionist worldview, by secular thinking people. So this hijacking, we must reclaim it. Then the next point is learning and education. You see, I have a big problem with this idea of education. In many people's minds, education is something that is done to you. You are to be educated. I prefer the word learning. If you want to learn, you can learn anywhere, especially today, with the internet, with Google, with our Wikipedia, whatever it is. So education seems to be something that has become commoditized. So we have to bring back the original idea of education, that is to be a learning person. And learning has to be inculcated as a culture to be practiced for life. So learning, of course, must include both the natural sciences as well as religious sciences in a holistic paradigm. The next challenge is actually how to apply knowledge for righteous living, as mentioned before, so that we actually maintain balance and harmony. At the moment, there is no initiative that I see that is significant enough leading towards this direction. The fourth challenge is, as mentioned before, innovation for value creation, the ecosystems that deal with innovation. Among the Muslim countries, I have not seen any evidence of that. Very, very low level of innovation. Compared to certain countries that are coming up right now, even in this part of the world, China is a big innovator right now. Korea was before, still is. And of course, our neighbors around us becoming better and better. I see, for example, Vietnam is becoming a better innovator than Malaysia, if you don't watch out, very, very soon. Now, the next point is governance, the framework for knowledge development and advancement. The governance framework is very, very poor. We don't have a sense of priorities. We don't put enough money into knowledge advancement. We don't have structure and processes that deal with these things. So these are the challenges. So let me quickly end my submission by mentioning 4 areas that we could perhaps look at in order to move forward. The first one is obviously to re-establish the meaning of knowledge and its role or value in society. The second one, I think strategic thinking. Muslims have not been good practitioners of strategic thinking. And here I include, for example, scenario planning, futures thinking, foresighting. And of course, we have to look at the knowledge system as a system. In other words, we have to apply systems thinking, which is not apparent in our discussions. And systems thinking is a big subject that is not new. It's been around for many, many years. One of the things that we have to look at is systems are not linear. We got used to the paradigm of the Newtonian model. Everything appears to be linear. It is an illusion. Systems generally are not linear. They are very non-linear. They behave in strange ways. but you can understand them. Now, system thinking includes feedback, a subject I studied many years ago, both positive and negative feedback. Negative feedback is used among the doctors. They call it homeostasis. Homeostasis means you attain a stable condition. But you could also have positive feedback, which actually introduces what is called exponential growth. And exponential growth, I would argue, is actually given by Allah, as mentioned in the Quran, in Baqarah, how one seed produces 7 years, and each year produces 70 seeds again. If you look at that, it's a geometric progression or exponential growth, right? Anyway, strategic thinking is very poor and needs to be improved significantly. Of course, the next point, number 4, way forward, is actually digital transformation. Here, I want to mention that many people think that technology drives things. Actually, technology doesn't drive anything. Technology is a means, a tool. Who are the drivers? Or what are the drivers? People, us, we drive. But provided we know what the agenda is, what the program is, right? Otherwise, we are unwitting users of technology. So you get into the trap, into the mindset of other people. So this is what I believe is very important. Apply digital transformation. Here, I imply collaboration, for example, open innovation. And of course, you have to create innovation ecosystems. Just to emphasize how important this idea is, look at the way the internet was developed. The IP was not protected for the internet protocol itself, nor was the web IP protected, was made open, right? And until today, the internet is run by volunteers, about 1,000 odd volunteers in the Internet Engineering Task Force that makes the internet run every day. Who are they? Are they paid? They are volunteers from around the world. This is sort of collaborative means that the technology has made available and possible, which did not exist before, right? Now, the last point I want to mention is democratization. Because knowledge is now democratized, we need also to use this as a means to advance our own knowledge. Democratization means availability, access, affordability, and so on. It must have inclusive participation so that we actually make knowledge available and useful to all. So that's democratization. So to summarize very quickly, it is actually creating a new kind of social order. Maybe you would call it the renewal of our civilization. Thank you. Sorry, Chairman, you are muted. Mr. Chairman, can you?
Thank you very much, Tunku, for your remarkable presentation on the subject matter. You have mentioned 4 areas which are important to be taken care of to reestablish the meaning of knowledge, strategic thinking, digital transformation, and democratization to advance our own knowledge. Inshallah, we will have some questions from the floor. After all panelists' presentation, we will go for question and answer session. Thank you very much again for your presentation, Tunku. We now move on to our second presenter, who is Professor Dr. Muhammad Riza Wahiddin. To give you a brief information, Prof. Riza obtained his PhD in August 1989 in quantum optics and the higher doctoral degree DSc from UK in December 2004. He is the MOSTI 1994 National Young Scientist Award winner in recognition of his research in quantum optics. He is the recipient of the IDG ASEAN Chief Security Officer 2011 award, and also recognized by the Academy of Sciences Malaysia as one of the 2017 top research scientists of Malaysia. He is a fellow of the Malaysian Mathematical Sciences Society, fellow of the Malaysian Institute of Physics, and fellow of the Academy of Sciences Malaysia. Presently, he is the Vice Chancellor of University Science Islam Malaysia. With this brief biodata, may I most respectfully call upon Professor Dr. Riza to make his presentation. فليتفضل, Prof.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Thank you, Prof. Tamim, for the kind introduction, fellow panelists. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and also the participants in this webinar. A very good morning. So I think maybe a brief extension of the introduction of myself to panelists as well as the participants of the webinar today. I'm actually having three of my colleagues on board here, fellow panelists, and for your information, they were all my former bosses. So let me start with Tunku Azman. Yeah, back in Mimo's days, so I was reporting to him directly. He was the presidency of Mimos. And also, Datuk Sri Prof. Zaliha, I was a deputy then at IUF. And then followed by Dato' Osman Bakar. So he was my Deputy Vice Chancellor at University of Malaya. So I'm very glad, very happy, honored to be on board with all my former bosses this morning. And greetings to all of you. So I've learned a lot from all three of you. And I'm not sure whether what I'm going to say is something that is, very worthwhile. But anyway, having said that, let me go back many, many years ago to put things in perspective. And that was the time of the Abbasid Caliphate. Okay, and then we attribute this era for the achievement of the Muslims, the golden age of the Muslim scholars, the Islamic civilization. So when we look at the achievement, which goes around 5 centuries, 500 years, the main contributors was started off, if not mistaken, with the second Khalifa, Khalifa Al-Mansur, the grandfather of Khalifa Harun al-Rashid, the 5th, and then of course later on attributed to Al-Ma'mun, the son of Harun al-Rashid. These 3 Khalifa apparently set the foundation for the golden age of the Islamic civilization. Now, the most important thing I think to highlight within this webinar is that the achievement of the Islamic civilization, of course, when we talk about Islamic civilization, we're talking about the knowledge advancement, is due to the synergy, the close correlation between education, knowledge, and the economy. So when we look closely to the achievements that was sending the message across the world, the close correlation, as I said, between economy as well as education is very clear. Because at that point of time, the educators, it was given a certain privileges, including the term that was introduced then called Mu'addib. Mu'addib, during the Abbasid Caliphate, refers to those who were given the responsibility to educate celebrities, then the people from the renowned people, noble people, and because of their status, they are not just like the ordinary educators. They were able to mingle with the upper society. They were given due respect and all the things that were needed. So it goes a long way, which means the educators during the time of the Abbasid Khalifah, it's not just about the ordinary person who educate. Yes, we do have the people in the mosque and the other places where they are also given fundings, as what we can witness today within Malaysia. Okay, so what I'm trying to say here is the status of these educators that they were called mu'adib. We can also see today what I compare as professors in the society. Okay, professors, they are also able to mingle with the various strata of society, right from the ground up to the people upstairs. So what has that got to do with what we are talking today? So the thing here is, Tengku Azman, the first panelist, mentioned just now, that the need for practical knowledge and also the various supporting elements to ensure that practical knowledge translates into something that is useful. It means that without a proper planning, without a proper vision, without a proper commitment, then the way forward is not going to be very easy and may fail. So when we look hindsight, it was very clear that the 500 years that history has witnessed, you need this kind of synergy. Firstly, because we need to have a strong economy and a strong desire, a thirst for knowledge. And of course, a very strong commitment in terms of political will, leadership, henceforth. So let me also now try to relate when we talk about practical knowledge, as Tengku Azman mentioned just now, translating into something that is value-added innovation. So I'm going to show on the screen now several slides. So the first slide that I'm going to share here, apart from the title slide, okay. So when we talk about innovation, according to one definition, there are 4 levels of innovation. Okay, so we need to understand this before we go deeper into the discussion this morning. So the first one is termed as incremental. The second level is differential. The third, radical. And the fourth, a breakthrough. So this sort of break down the innovation that we are dealing today specifically. And if we look into the first level, when we talk about the entry level incremental, this means incremental changes to existing outputs. In other words, improvisation. The next level, differential innovation, we talk about new outputs for the same existing markets, followed by radical innovation, new outputs for new markets. And then there's the breakthrough, new outputs that create new markets. So according to the study, when we look into the global innovation index, Malaysia seems to be doing quite fine. We are actually number 33 ranked in the world in terms of innovation overall. But the analysis shows that the components that support this innovation, we are good in terms of talent, not very, very excellent, but we do have good elements of talent, infrastructure within the innovation ecosystem. But what we lack significantly is in terms of innovation. So that's why I'm sharing, I'm taking a few moments here to give a better understanding of, we break down innovation. So to highlight these 4 levels of innovation, I'll give you an example. We take the case of spectacles, glasses. So most of us are wearing glasses. So if we take the entry level, the baseline, the glasses that people used many, many years ago, they started with a clear glass lens. So this may be able to correct short-sightedness or long-sightedness. So when we give an example of incremental innovation in this example, we're talking about colored glass lenses. So initially, when we were wearing our glasses, our forefathers, our glass lenses were very clear. But later on, we found out in the 1960s, you can have colored glass lenses. So this is the first, I'm giving an example of the incremental innovation, where in the 1960s, the American company Corning introduced the react to light photochromic lenses, where the lenses, which is glass-based, will be able to react to light. So as you go outdoor, your clear glass lenses will react to the sunshine, the sunlight, and will become darker and darker. So we can say that this is your first incremental innovation. The next level, differential innovation, is that you see that people are starting to complain that wearing glass lenses is quite heavy on the nose. So the scientists and the technologists came out with this second differential innovation, which is plastic lenses instead of glass lenses. So become lighter, and it can be coupled with also the react to light sensitivity. So you have now differential innovation where you introduce plastic lenses and also able to change according to the light intensity. So you can have colored, or what we say as react to light plastic lenses. So that is the second level of innovation, is differential within this example. And then later on, instead of having your lenses within your glasses, spectacles, the scientists and the technologists found out that why not put the lenses right onto your eyeballs? So that is a radical innovation. Instead of wearing your spectacles, now people are wearing contact lenses. So your lenses are now on your eyeball to correct your short-sightedness. Even today, people are wearing these contact lenses, not because of short-sightedness or some other illnesses, but to beautify their appearance. So that's why we see people sometimes green, with a green eye, with a blue eye, and so on, which usually is quite rare for Asian. Okay, and then finally, the fourth level of innovation, we have the breakthrough. So here, instead of having lenses, get rid of the lenses, and we talk about lensless solution. For example, LASIK today, you shoot a laser right through your eyeballs, and you correct your vision accordingly. So these are examples of, I'm trying to give an example of the levels of innovation that things are happening in the world today, so that we can try to understand the bigger context here. All right. So quickly, giving the definition of the levels of innovation, we see that the state of Muslim countries, okay, the source of this data comes from the Global Innovation Index 2020. And if you look at the broken line somewhere around the 70 point there, where Malaysia is written as world median, that is the world median. So you compare the selected Muslim countries, we have Iran, we have Turkey, and Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is around the world median. Iran and Turkey are above the average. Malaysia, according to 2020, is down to number 72. Sorry, I think it's about 70. Yeah. And then 70 is around the median. And then Malaysia, Kazakhstan just below, followed by Algeria, Indonesia, and Bahrain. So in terms of knowledge creation, based on the Global Innovation Index, Muslim countries, from this point of view, only 2, perhaps 3, including Saudi Arabia, which is above the world median. The rest, the pack, are below the world median. And the basis for the knowledge creation indicators based on this Global Innovation Index is number 1, patent application filed by residents, both at the National Patent Office and at international level through the PCT, Patent Cooperation Treaty. So there are 2 things here. 1, you file it locally in national level, also taken into account at the international level, followed by utility model application filed locally. You have scientific technical published articles in peer-reviewed journals, and for 2020, they also included the H index. So with these 5 factors, they have actually managed to sort of measure the knowledge creation from countries all over the world. So when we look at this, I would say that the reason why we are lagging behind, when we talk about we, I'm referring to the Muslim countries, we are lagging behind because of course, in terms of money, there's one thing, the economy, as we try to relate to what happened to the Abbasid Caliphate. We talk about the importance of synergy between education and economy. And fast forward to what we have today, virtually all Muslim countries, they are not that rich. Maybe the Arab countries in the Middle East, but then again, they have other factors. And the most important factor here is the level of innovation that Muslims are able to come up with. So most of the time, I would say, including myself, we are playing around level 1 and level 2 innovation. That is the incremental differential. And not many of us are able to cross into the radical innovation or breakthrough innovation. And hence, it relates to what Tengku, the first panelist, mentioned just now, practical knowledge related to values added. So if we are unable to cross into at least the radical innovation level, then what we witness today is most of us are not doing cutting edge innovation. And therefore, we are not really leading in the world today. So I'm giving an example. When Tengku Azman invited me to MIMOS way back in 2005. So I'm giving an example here how Muslims will be able to create knowledge. And this, we have done it way back in 2005 until about 2012. So the example I'll give you here is something to do with my expertise related to quantum technology, how to send messages securely so that it's not intercepted by an intruder. So secure signal transmission. So what we did was we come up with a network of quantum-based technology so that we can securely send messages, communication between different parties within the network. And because of that initiative, The Economist, the magazine The Economist, Technology Quarterly, in March 2017 reported that in terms of knowledge creation, as we've seen just now, which includes patents, IPs filed, we can see that Malaysia is actually misaligned. The box actually go down a bit. It should be Malaysia I'm trying to refer to, but the box is referring to South Korea. Anyway, under quantum cryptography, Malaysia recorded 31 patents way back in 2015. And then a little bit down the slide, you will see also Malaysia recorded 20 under the topic of quantum key distribution. So what I'm trying to say is, while we look at from the Global Innovation Index that briefly described just now, in terms of Muslim countries lagging behind, but at the same time, in certain areas that Muslims, scientists are able also to become leaders in contemporary or recent times. So this is what we did and our own experience, as we've seen from here, that Malaysia under quantum cryptography way back in 2015, we are number 5 in the world. And then if you look under quantum key distribution, Malaysia is number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 for that particular field. So how is this possible? So number one, you must have the strategy, the vision moving forward, and the political will, as well as the support, financial support, the infrastructure, and so on. So on one hand, we may be, looking at things gloomily, but on the other hand, what we are trying to say, Muslims today, they are able to also become leaders in their own certain niche areas. So this example I'm giving from my own experience way back when I was using my expertise and helping the nation through MIMOS to come up with certain solutions. And then there are also some other niche areas. So Muslims are also leaders in the niche areas. So now, if we go to the other document, they talk about the global Islamic economy. So in this case, very niche areas where we are talking about $2 trillion US, where we are talking about consumer spending, and then 1.9 billion Muslims across 6 real economy sectors, and then also about 3 trillion USD, we have Islamic finance assets. So with that, we look at Malaysia leads overall global Islamic economy indicator for 8 straight years. Okay, so Malaysia is doing fine in terms of this particular area, and we are also doing fine in the sense that there are 6 sectors in this index. And overall, of course, Malaysia is still number one for many, many years, but only in the area of halal food, Islamic finance, Muslim-friendly travel, and pharma cosmetics. So we are not that good in terms of media, recreation, and modest fashion. So this shows that on one hand, maybe we cannot see Muslims doing well overall when we look at the Global Innovation Index, but on the other hand, there are certain areas, niche areas, that we are leaders. And that there are things that we can do a lot here, especially as what we've been sharing just now. So we take, for example, under the case of the creative industry, okay, we have these Omar and Hannah. Of course, we are familiar with Upin, the study case of Upin and Ipin. Here we also have Omar and Hannah, Islamic themed children's animated series, co-produced by Digital Durian and Astro in Malaysia. So if we look at it, established in 2016, the first song, Alhamdulillah, March 2017, we have 1 million views within 1 week, 3.6 million subscribers, 1.5 billion views on Malay YouTube channel, 50% from Indonesia. July 2018, launched English YouTube channel, 500,000 subscribers with 171 million views. So if we look into these kind of examples, there's light at the end of the tunnel, how I see it. And of course, we can discuss further on how to face the challenges and also to grab the opportunities so that we have a bigger share in terms of knowledge advancement or knowledge generation. So I stop there to give way to my other panelists. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dato' Prof. Riza, for your presentation on the present state of Muslim leadership in knowledge advancement title. We had a different scenario from a different perspective, which is really very useful. We are able to learn many things in terms of Muslims' participations and contributions in the knowledge production and knowledge efficiency in management. With this, we move on to the next panelist, who is none other than Dato' Sri Professor Dr. Zaleha Kamaruddin, who is a former rector of International Islamic University and currently a professor in International Institute of Islamic Thought and Civilization. To give you a brief background, Professor Dato' Sri Dr. Zaleha Kamaruddin was appointed the first female rector of the International Islamic University in 2011, making her the first woman to lead and head an Islamic university in the Muslim world. She is also the first woman to be appointed as a Sharia appellate court judge in Malaysia's Sharia judicial history in 2018. Prior to her appointment as the rector of IIUM, she was on secondment as Deputy Director General of the Malaysian Institute of Islamic Understanding, IKI. She is a renowned scholar specializing in comparative family laws with specific focus on women and children's rights. She was appointed as a member of the Selangor Council of Religious Affairs for 10 years, and also a member of the Fatwa Committee for the Selangor. Recently, in 2020, she has been appointed as a member of the Religious Council of Pahang. She is also the Deputy Chair of the Board of Governors of University College Yayasan Pahang, and also Chair of the Yayasan Tabung Tuanku Chancellor. At the federal level, she is a member of the Technical Committee on Sharia and Civil Laws from 2005 till now. Department of Islamic Religious Affairs, Prime Minister's Department, where she is involved in drafting 14 model laws. As an appointed member of the National Religious Council, she was also appointed to chair the panel on current issues on women and Islam from 2010 until 2018. PISWI was sanctioned by the Council of Rulers as a think tank body with a specific mandate to advise in contemporary issues involving Islam, women, and children's rights. In 2017, she was also appointed as the head law cluster for the Islamic Consultative Council and has been appointed in 2019 as an executive council member of INSCOTE, Malaysia. Internationally, she is recognized as a leading authority on comparative family laws with specific focus on women and children's rights, especially under the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, Convention on the Rights of the Child, and other relevant Hague conventions applicable to family and children. Her research interest includes private international law with specific focus on cross-border children issues. Professor Zaleha was also invited by the Government of Canada, co-chair of the Working Party on Mediation, in cooperation with the Permanent Bureau of the Hague Conference on Private International Law and the Netherlands Ministry of Foreign Affairs to present keynote addresses on the Islamic perspectives on cross-border parental child abduction in April 2014 at The Hague, November 2014 in Kuala Lumpur, June 2015 in Macau, and June 2016 in Tokyo. She was also appointed as an independent expert by the Hague Conference on Private International Law in Malta 4 Conference in May 2016, and as a research person in the focus group discussion on compatibility of the Convention on the Civil Aspects of International Child Abduction to Islam and Indonesia national law in November 2016 in Jakarta. Professor Zaleha has been invited as a keynote speaker in various conferences from the Far East to the West. As a consultant trainer who believes in the research-based contributions in women's issues, Professor Zaleha has been actively involved in UN Habitat training workshops all over the world. She's also engaged with the International Institute of Policy, International Institute of Public Policy and Management, University of Malaya training programs, where she is known as a champion of women's rights through property rights. She is currently preparing a training module with her team based on her edited book entitled Approaches to Empowering Muslim Women Through Property Rights. She is also the deputy chair in the OIC Women Advisory Council from 2016 to 2020. In 2005, she headed a major consultancy project on assessing delays in disposition of matrimonial cases in the Malaysian Sharia courts, followed by assessing delays in implementation of maintenance orders in the Malaysian Sharia courts. And she has several other contributions towards achieving. Now, her research served as an impetus for the historical appointment of women judges in the Sharia judiciary in Malaysia. In 2014, she was appointed by the Malaysian government as a lead consultant to develop the Maqasid Sharia Index for Malaysia. And at the successful completion of the project, she was appointed in 2015 as the deputy chairman of the governance of Maqasid Sharia Index Committee. And he has a long biodata, and due to the time constraint, I'm not able to focus on other achievements of Dato Sri Prof. Zaleha Qamaruddin. So with this brief information, may I respectfully call upon Dato Sri Dr. Prof. Zaleha Qamaruddin to make her presentation. فليتفضل Prof. Dato Sri. Can we request the technician to upload Dato Sri's slide, please?
Yeah, thank you. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, wassalatu wassalamu ala ashrafil anbiya wal mursaleen wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Alhamdulillah, with the grace of Allah, We are here to discuss about a very important topic on the present state of Muslim leadership in knowledge advancement, a critical assessment. You know, most of the time people doesn't like if you do a critical assessment, but in the context of advancing knowledge, I was like trying to understand where I fit in, especially as a third panel speaker. I would like to thank Yang Mulia Tengku Azman for giving an overview of advancing knowledge. And to Prof. Reza as well for giving details on where we are. So I thought I'll be doing another part which has not been touched deeply by the two earlier panels, which is advancing knowledge in the Islamic world, specifically in the Islamic world, but basically from the governance perspective. Yeah. I was thinking of how I could give value to the topic is through my experience looking into governing knowledge advancement in IIUM and with network with OIC, because IIUM is a body with OIC as well. Alhamdulillah, we were acknowledged as a member of OIC in 2011, the year I came in. So we had a good support there, moral support, and a few projects coming in through OIC, and with ISESCO as well, which is the education arm of the OIC, just like UNESCO and education arm of the UN. So I will be speaking on this, but I will be only using one slide to explain governance of knowledge advancement. All right, so this is the slide. If you were to see, it's just a figure of a tree. I would usually use this to explain my thoughts because I thought it would be easier to do so. You know, when we want to advance knowledge in the Islamic world, it's not easy. Number one, because we have a lot of challenges. And that's the reason why the branches, I would say the branches would reflect new knowledge. And the new knowledge should go into all these areas, which according to Maqasid al-Sharia is daruriyat. I would say the basic protection is not hajiyat, is not tahsiniyat, which is like embellishment. We are just going to cover basics, and even that we have not covered properly. For example, where is our new knowledge on the protection of progeny? Where and how many of our new knowledge on protection of life? In relation, for example, with COVID-19, which country, all right, which country? Any Muslims producing vaccine? Yeah, they are a couple from Turkey, yeah. Well, I'm happy. I'm happy things are going on fine, but what's more on protection of life? What about protection of property? Yang Mulia Tengku did mention about economy, so as Prof. Reza, protection of wealth, protection of property, protection of deen, on religion, and protection of akal, which specifically talks about knowledge. So these are the 5 areas which I mentioned as daruriyat, the basic protection. So that's the reason why Muslim countries or Islamic countries under OIC is basically covering all these daruriyat areas. Yeah. Although governance of advancing knowledge will be underground, all right, the roots area where I will be touching on impact factor, all right, because although Prof. Reza has shown areas that we could work on, in fact, although these are areas that we should work on, but these also are not our prominent areas. I know from what we've done at IUM through our INHAD, Institute of Halal Management, they are concentrating, but Japan is using their expertise. South Korea were using their expertise as well. And they were all over the place. And the shortage of human resource there, did mentioned by Tengku as well. So that's our impact factor, yeah. And then how to go about it, right? It was mentioned earlier by Prof. Reza, how to go about it. But I would also discuss on taking the long route, taking the long route. And then if you see the figure, it has also the generation of knowledge. Challenges of creating knowledge through action research, which I will explain later what it's all about. Collective cognitive responsibility for the advancement of knowledge, and how research creates new knowledge. So basically, the focus of all these areas are on governance. I am confident of this because I have gone through this when I was working with our Research Management Center. And then when I was doing networking with OIC and ISESCO and a few other universities under ISESCO, I think there's about 300 universities affiliated with ISESCO, which is good. Yeah? And using that network for collective cognitive responsibility for advancement of knowledge. All right. So basically, these are the areas that I want to touch in this half an hour of Prof. Tamim. And I would like to concentrate as well our role to our students and how students can further develop this, and also our role in the society. Dr. Tengku did mention about contribution to the society, where we are second, I think, after the West. Though it is our role, actually our main role, to give to the society. Our khidmah to the society, but we are not there yet. This has been mentioned by Prof. Reza as well. We are not there yet. The other section of the society that we are supposed to do is on our stakeholders. All right, we are answerable to our stakeholders, especially in Malaysia, where part of the tax were made to sponsor some of the research. What are the impacts of this research? And also target groups. I've been studying a few yayasan concentrating on research. And you have foundations, overseas foundations in the UK, the Health Foundation, where a foundation, which is not a university, has about 160 projects to deal with. And this is a foundation run to concentrate on health. So where are we? So the main question is, where are we? So let's look on governance and when we talk about action research. I'm concentrating on action research because action research refers to a family of research methodology that pursue both action and research outcome is changes oriented, a positive social value such as improved educational practice. Okay, our first speaker did mention about value, right? And in this specific discussion, I would like to concentrate on social value. Because the focus of action research is on real research, in context of which the researcher is a part for the purpose of changing a problematic situation for the better. All right? So we have to measure where we are and where we are going. Right? So although there is conscious effort to make the knowledge that was gained during the process so that others may learn from it, what is important is advancing the field of investigation. Right? We don't want a group of scholars saying that they are in the forefront, but actually they have missed the point. This has done by country A, B, C, D. They are perhaps number 30. Right? So when we talk about governance, we really have to do our literature review to know where we are. Again, I said where we are so that we could learn from the number 1 or number 2 or number 3. Right? So that's the reason why we are asking our researchers to establish this network. It's not just to work alone or just to work with their own team. It should be multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary, intradisciplinary. And how do we do that? It's a network. Again, I mentioned the challenge of creating knowledge through action research. So what are the challenges? As been mentioned by our first panel, 500 years before, we are in our golden age. Where are we now? And in the years preceding the 21st century, knowledge advancement had to be in propositional form. That is answering the question, what is new to what is already known about the topic under investigation. Right? So, again, as highlighted, the nature of research is different now compared to like before the 21st century. 50 years before, we cannot use the same process. In more recent times, a contribution to new knowledge could also take the form of an answer to the question, how can I go about transforming the ideas about the topic and how to implement something which is not necessarily new, as mentioned by the second panel, not necessarily new, but innovation, which is based on the current solution within the research, but it's called innovation with value. Yeah, with value. You can come up with so many innovations, but without value. There are many innovations without value, which gives only value to the individual, more self-serving. So undertaking action research may be both rewarding and a challenging experience as well. Challenging because there is no fixed formula. So the researcher has to work on their own to come up with a formula. Rewarding because knowledge generated through action research has practical values, which is relevant to the context within which it takes place. So you see the branch, the big branch is a big tree, giving opportunities for branches, for more branches to sprout, giving more khidmah to the society. We don't want research which is self-serving, but with lesser impact. The question is, how do we measure impact? Again, we have to come up with the governance, issue of governance. Again, our first speaker mentioned about legal governance, which is not there. There is, but it's like silent. It's not in the forefront. I did mention about collective cognitive responsibility for the advancement of knowledge. You see, we talk about I'm sorry, it goes out of my mind now. Intellectual property. Yeah, intellectual property. Because of intellectual property, perhaps collective responsibility is a little bit low, right? Because intellectual property generates income. That is perhaps one of the reasons for collective cognitive responsibility. We really have to work on this to find a good balance between collective connective responsibility and intellectual property. This is another area that we could look into. The other is we mentioned about lifelong learning for our students to assist in research, to gain from research, and to give back to the society the research results. We have to talk about flexibility as well. We should go into creativity. We should go on collaborative expertise. What is happening in the Muslim world? Collaborative expertise is lacking. One, perhaps, there is lack of expertise. Brain drains happens, and these Muslims, I would say, they will go to the Western countries. We've done research on this, Prof. Tengku. The Muslims are clever people, but the brain drain happens because the pull and push factor. They do not have the pull factor in the Muslim world, therefore they are serving the Western world. The push factor pushing them and the pull factor from the Western world, therefore we have experts, but there they are in the Western countries, serving the Western world. I wanted so much to speak on this, but due to time constraint, I will just stop today. Perhaps we can have a real good and deep discussion on brain drain of Muslim scholars and Muslim experts on this. You know, just like our couple that came out with the COVID vaccine, they were Turkish and still Turkish, but they migrated to Germany, if I'm not mistaken. They've migrated to Germany. I'm not surprised. Maybe the pull factor is more over there. Now we have with us other factors which we need to firm up the learning organizations which works on invention. And we have also to work on higher order thinking skills, which are very rich in the Western world. When we go and do sabbatical, we feel the rich atmosphere of research, which is, which is lacking in the Muslim world. And technological literacy in the Muslim world as well is quite low. Now, I want to touch about one area on how research create new knowledge. And the traditional role of universities. When I came in 2011, I remember we were working very hard for RU status, because by having an RU status, we would have money coming in to sponsor our research. They told us that we would get about, I'm not quite sure, I've forgotten the figure. And we were all working towards it, putting in our own money so that we could get more money. This is like money chasing money. And we hope to turn around the university to become a research university. And we would be spearheading other universities in the Muslim world. Unfortunately, we did not get the RU status. You know, this is like a catch-2 situation. When we did not get the RU status, students from Muslim countries would not choose our university. They would rather choose university with an RU status, because their sponsors were only looked at RU status universities. And most of the Western world, especially in the US, they have RU status. So there goes our students. When we got, we only got more students from the Muslim world after 9/11. They were facing problems in the US. But that is easily forgotten. 10 years after 9/11, they went back to the US. So you see a drop. This is also governance. There is a drop of international students in Malaysian universities. Although at that time, I remember 4 or 5 years ago, under Minister Datuk Sri Idris Jusuf, he wanted Malaysia to be the hub of education. It doesn't happen. That's one of our challenges. I think one key way to realize this vision, all right, where Muslims leading, I'm not talking about the Western world, leading Muslim countries, is through supporting and funding innovation, researchers, and evaluation. We have so many data. We have our experts to evaluate the data, but we have to find funders to fund innovation research. Then, not only that, to generate new knowledge, we have to have a long-standing commitment to research. Long-standing commitment. We have to show our utmost commitment to generate new knowledge, not just a one-off. Unfortunately, in the Muslim world, one of our challenges is political instability, wars. We know we have, I went to Pakistan when I was doing research on Maqasid Index. We met so many experts but they can't do much because of political instability. They have many more experts than Malaysians. We went to Turkey, there's also challenges there. At that time, Turkey was chairing the OIC under the present President Erdogan. We went to Morocco, where the leading Maqasid scholar is there, now the president of Islamic Scholars Network. We went to Oman, a very rich oil country. I don't want to say the challenges that we face there. We went to Indonesia, the largest population of Muslims in the world. They were very helpful. They helped us. They came up with their own conference to answer a main question. How Islamic are we? You know, that basic question. So so that's the reason why we are only concentrating on the daruriyat, not the hajiyat, not the tahsiniyat, the 5 protections, from protection of akal to protection of life, to protection of deen, to protection of progeny, to the protection of property. Then only we can go forward. We can go forward. The protection of akal is very important, very, very important. So the question is, the last question, I think this is my last slide, which is not here, is how do we go about doing this? Because of time constraint, I guess I leave it to the final speaker, Professor Emeritus Datuk Dr. Usman Bakar. I respect him as my teacher, giving a direction in way forward. How do we go about doing this? How do we create and generate new knowledge through in-house at ISTEC? We're talking about in-house at ISTEC, and externally commissioned analysis and research through creating chairs and fellowships. I once did a comparative study with University Malaysia, Prof. Datuk Tengku. I found that they have the largest chairs in Malaysia compared to other universities. I wanted to emulate. Somehow we had our own challenges, especially in terms of funding. At that time, I remember you had 16 chairs. I don't know what is the current chairs now, but creating chairs means creating new knowledge. At least that's from my perspective. Creating chairs means creating new knowledge. Creating fellowships means supporting chairs. Unfortunately, these challenges are not appreciated. But before leaving, my last slide is we have to be well connected to the research colleagues, our research colleagues. We have to be well connected with policymakers, and we have to be well connected with practitioners. All right, so that can be calculated through governance. We have to have knowledge exchange events. We have to share new research outputs widely, and we can employ independent expertise to ensure research is well grounded in policy and practice. They need not be at the university, they can be somewhere else. Our Muslim scientists in the Western world, we can, if they don't want to come back, we can employ them as independent experts, right? As I've mentioned, we have the impact factor. We can measure impact factor. We can see staff who are actively contributing to effective policy development nationally and internationally using our connection. That can be tabulated as well. And then we have to have increase in the number of areas where our expertise has been used. All right, so basically that's it. Although I think we have to take our what we call the long view, where we choose our partner, where we talk about research investment, where we talk about capacity building within research community, where we should also tabulate academic career progression. This is in relation to our staff. We have to have multidisciplinary research, and we have to create reputation or branding for high quality research. We have to also have financially sustainable research units. And last but not least, say these research capacities which we have to develop. I think Professor had been doing this when he was a deputy rector. Somehow, I think I'm not going to use luck. Luck is not on our side that we were not given research university status. This is one of the sad moment. I would say sad moment as a leading university in the Muslim world. We are not there because we do not have the RU status. You know, I conclude my statement with, I don't want to conclude my statement with a very negative remark, but I believe, inshallah, we pray and hope one day we will have the research status. And we pray one day we manage to turn around our university, IIUM, to be like University of Malaysia, We don't have to look far. We just look at our neighbor, University Malaysia, and other five or four other research universities in the country. With that, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sri, Professor Dr. Zaleha Kamaruddin, for your presentation, in which you have mainly raised the issue of governance, and you have referred to the 5 fundamental principles of Maqasid al-Sharia. Inshallah, we will discuss your presentation during the question and answer session. With this, we have our next speaker, who is none other than Dr. Professor Uthman Bakar, to give you a brief introduction, although we all know him very well, but for the purpose of new participants in our webinar, I would like to say that Professor Uthman Bakar holds a doctorate degree in Islamic philosophy from Temple University, Philadelphia, USA. He is currently a holder of Al-Ghazali Chair of Epistemology and Civilizational Studies and Renewal at International Institute of Islamic Thought and Civilization, IIUM. He is also Emeritus Professor in Philosophy of Science at University of Malaya. He was formerly Distinguished Professor and Director of Sultan Umar Ali Saifuddin Center for Islamic Studies, University Brunei Darussalam. Professor Usman was also formerly Malaysia Chair of Islam in Southeast Asia at the Prince Talal Al Walid Center for Muslim Christian Understanding, Georgetown University, Washington, D.C., and Deputy Vice Chancellor, Academic and Research at University of Malaya. Dr. Usman is the author and editor of 40 books and more than 300 articles on various aspects of Islamic thought and civilization, particularly Islamic science and philosophy in which he is a leading authority. His most well-known books are Classification of Knowledge in Islam, published in 1992, and Tawheed and Science, published in 1992. His latest books are titled Al-Farabi, Life, Works and Significance, published in 2018, which is the new edition, and Colonialism in the Malay Archipelago, Civilizational Encounters, published by ISTAC in 2020. He has been named among the 500 most influential Muslims in the world since 2019. He was made a Dato in 1994 by the Sultan of Pahang and a Dato by the King in 2000. With this, may I most respectfully call upon Dato Professor Dr. Usman Bakar to make his presentation. فليتفضل Professor.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alamin. Wassalatu wassalamu ala ashrafil anbiya wa mursalin Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And a very good morning. The moderator, Professor Tamim, and fellow panelists, Dr. Tengku Azman, Dr. Riza, Muhammad Riza, Professor Zaleha, and ladies and gentlemen. I know that I will be the last speaker. The question and something that what worries me, what to say as the last speaker. Because I know the three panelists, the topic is very familiar to them. I mean, they have been dealing with the subject, with the topic for a long time. They are leaders in their own right, leaders in the knowledge advancement. They play the leadership role and the leadership roles, and they have each of them has had an institution to back their ideas and their strategic plans about knowledge advancement. So I thought, well, maybe I should provide. I thought I know what they're going to say because I'm quite familiar with their thinking. So I thought I might contribute to the discussion by providing an additional perspective. And what is not common between me and them is philosophy. So maybe I thought, all right, I will provide a philosophical perspective to the topic. And more precisely, I will respond to the topic from the perspective of Islamic epistemology. As we all know, epistemology is a very, very important branch of philosophy. So I'm going to stick to the notes that I prepared. The notes I prepared, as you can see later, actually I cannot escape also from mentioning again, repeating some of the points that they have touched, but I gave a different twist, provided also some additional explanations to the points and issues they have raised. Yeah? For example, well, thank you, Dr. Tengku Azman, for and also Dr. Rizal. I think between the two of them, they provide complementary picture, yeah, presentations on the present state of Muslim leadership. In the case of Dr. Tengku Azman, I think although he did not elaborate because of time factor, I suppose In other words, here is a very important issue. In other words, when comparing to other countries, the Muslims actually do not really do as well. In fact, quite far away. Although among the Muslims themselves, as Dr. Riza's statistics and graphs show, in other words, is something to be happy about, to be concerned. But basically, I mean, they have given an objective the account of the present state of Muslim leadership. And in the case of Professor Zeller, of course, I think she came out with a beautiful tree, the tree of knowledge advancement. I counted out of 9 branches, 5 branches were of the Maqasid al-Sharia, and how important Maqasid Sharia is to the project on knowledge advancement. Okay, this is basically my response to the topic from the perspective of Islamic epistemology. So I said, there are 3 main issues raised by the topic. The first issue, and also the most important, is knowledge advancement. That concept of knowledge advancement itself, that needs a refinement, needs to be refined. What do we really mean by knowledge advancement? To what kind of knowledge can we apply the term knowledge advancement? And in which areas of knowledge activities? There's such a wide range of knowledge activities. So when I say knowledge advancement, to which activities we apply the term. So in my view, this question demands a lot of explanations from us, and certainly the hope of ISTAC is that after this program, this webinar, there'll be people doing some follow-ups, students, academics, to really look at this concept of knowledge advancement, especially from the Islamic perspective. Now, the second issue is about leadership in knowledge advancement, particularly Muslim leadership. Again, we had a chance, to get a kind of some knowledge about it from the presenters where we are. So quite clearly, this issue is a consequence of the first issue, right? Because knowledge advancement, no matter how we define it, needs leaders to articulate the concept and to turn it into reality. We need leaders. But Dr. Tunku Azman raised briefly, but very, very important. There is no willingness, the will to lead is not there, which is a very important brief statement, but it tells a lot. So I think this is and that supports my own view that the issue of leadership needs to be addressed. Now, the third issue, which follows from the first and the second, is the criteria of advancement. All right, what are the criteria, and what are their sources? Are all the criteria universal, or are there also culturally determined criteria that allows for the idea of cultural context of knowledge, progress, and advancement to be taken into account? In my view, these are the core issues that the topic would like us to address. Let us think carefully about the first issue, the issue of knowledge advancement. Well, my view is that it is a much broader concept. So certainly good to look at the slides presented by Prof. Riza, but his concentration was on the creation of new knowledge, which is of course very, very important, but that is not synonymous with knowledge advancement. I think, of course, with respect to knowledge, the core meaning of advancement is increase, growth, and accumulation of knowledge. if in a society we see increase and growth in knowledge and its accumulation, then we may speak of knowledge advancement in that society. So it's easy to understand, yeah. In this respect, the Quran refers to the idea of the human need for an increase of knowledge in the form of a dua. The Quran teaches man to pray for more knowledge. Rabb zidni ilma. My Lord, increase me in knowledge. So the idea of increase in knowledge is something that is in the Quran revealed. It means that it must be a very important idea. The idea of increment, growth, accumulation of knowledge. Now, I would like to give three comments, three clarifications to this Quranic dua, Quranic message. I divide them into three components. Because in my commentary on the verse, I give three comments. First, in pursuing knowledge, we should always remember that the ultimate source of knowledge is God, who is the all-knowing. In other words, that relations between man and God is never cut off, severed, when we talk about knowledge advancement. I think that's important. This means that in the Islamic conception of knowledge advancement, God is never out of the picture. Now, my second comment, the knowledge that we are asking God to increase, cannot be knowledge that is unbeneficial. This point was, of course, was emphasized by the Prophet ﷺ when he frequently made the dua. Allahumma a'udhu bika min ilmin la yanfa. Min ilmin la yanfa. A'udhu bika min ilmin la yanfa. I seek refuge in thee from unbeneficial knowledge. Knowledge that does not benefit. Some translate as useless knowledge. Now, this is very, 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 very important. In the sea of knowledge, the ocean of knowledge that is produced by human beings, all right? Knowledge is mixed. Beneficial knowledge is there, unbeneficial knowledge is also there, or less beneficial. So the idea of sense of priority should be there. That, in other words, the Muslim brains, the Muslim mind should be having that strategy that, in other words, what is our priorities, given the fact that there is infinite knowledge? Should we just follow the rest? We just simply follow, or we should start opening up new lines, new branches of knowledge? I mean, that is very important. The significance of this dua. So, thus, knowledge advancement has to exclude knowledge that brings no benefit to the individual seeker and to the community at large. And my third comment, real increase in knowledge is personal. This may find a lot of opposition to this view, because we have this. But this is my own view, based on my understanding of that Quranic dua. I'm saying that real increase in knowledge is personal and individual in nature. It is what is stored in your memory. What is in your computer, in the libraries, museums, and other storage facilities is only yours potentially. The knowledge produced by Islamic civilization over the centuries that is now kept in beautiful libraries in the Muslim world, it's not our knowledge, even if the libraries are ours. It is not really ours until that knowledge is downloaded into our hearts and minds. This is a very important distinction to make between real knowledge and potential knowledge. This is the significance of the Quranic prayer. It is the prayer of the individual soul, not a collective prayer. Oh Lord, increase me in knowledge, not increase us in knowledge. But the impact of the successful prayer of the individual on society is not less impressive. That does not take out the importance of knowledge to the whole society. This is because when everybody experiences knowledge increase, then the community as a whole will actually have a combined increase in knowledge that we call real knowledge advancement. Islam therefore emphasizes the idea of a knowledgeable ummah comprising knowledgeable individuals. The ideal ummah is one in which everyone is educated and knowledgeable, since in Islam, everyone is his or her own priest. More or less, we have, so those are my 3 comments. So more or less, we have settled the issue of what kind of knowledge to which we can apply the term knowledge advancement. In simple terms, this knowledge may be described as beneficial knowledge. And this beneficial knowledge may be divided into several categories, into several categories. Fardu Ain, knowledge. This is a very important technical term in Islamic epistemology, in Islamic culture, Islamic civilization. Fardu Kifaya. And of course, the possibilities, what is possible, mubah. And of course, the opposite of that is knowledge that does not benefit, which is knowledge, which is what the dua the Prophet said, La yanfa. As for the detailed content of each category, this is a matter of Islamic law to decide. Even in Malaysia, there's still the old understanding of Fardu Ain, giving very limited examples. Similarly, Fardu Kifaya, giving very limited examples. But with the growth of knowledge, I think, and also with the changes occurring in human society with different kinds of problems, then the concept of Fardu Kifaya knowledge should also be expanded. So why 50 years, since the last 50 years, say for example, the list of Fardu Kifaya sciences had not at all increased. Whereas the concept of Fardu Kifaya is very, very important. Now, but as I said, this is a jurisprudential issue of faith, jurisprudence. Now, the contemporary world is characterized by the following. Number 1, unprecedented knowledge explosion that give rise to numerous new forms of knowledge, not all of which are beneficial and praiseworthy. In fact, some of them are destructive. As we are speaking right now, somewhere on earth, people are producing destructive knowledge with the intention to hurt other people, to destroy other people. Then, number 2, the prevalence of unethical practices in the production of knowledge and in the application of knowledge. Unethical practices. All right? Going against the very ethics that religions stand for, not just Islam. Now, number 3, the widespread ignorance and confusion in the Muslim community about Islamic axiology and ethics of knowledge, Islamic theory of values, and the ethics of knowledge, Islamic ethics of knowledge. So given these 3 things, the present scenario, perhaps there is now an urgent need to introduce and develop an epistemological jurisprudence or jurisprudence of knowledge. Just we have started developing several new branches of jurisprudence, the most notable being environmental jurisprudence. It could be what we know now for knowledge, because a lot of misapplications in knowledge. So Hopefully, the newly envisaged epistemological jurisprudence could help restore order and harmony in the world of knowledge activities. Or at least it could help us to conduct a more disciplined, more fruitful discourse on knowledge advancement. Now, to the question, to which knowledge activities can we apply the term knowledge advancement? This I'm taking up, following up the points raised by Professor Tamin, the moderator, during his introductory speech. We have already identified knowledge increase, knowledge growth, and knowledge accumulation as the core. As the core meaning of knowledge advancement. In other words, the creation of new knowledge is the most important dimension of knowledge advancement. Without new knowledge, a society will become static and lethargic. By new knowledge, we mean knowledge that is created by the society in question. By the society in question. All right? And not knowledge that it just buys fresh from the international supermarkets of knowledge goods and items. It's two different things now. So I'm talking from the perspective of Muslim society, the knowledge that is produced by another society, not that it buys from East Asia or from Europe. Okay, yes, sometimes it's necessary. That's granted, but it cannot be all the time. We are just buyers and consumers. So, just as there is a big difference between knowledge that is in our hearts and minds and knowledge that is in books and journals in the libraries, so is there a profound difference between knowledge that is created by our indigenous brains and new knowledge, by our indigenous brains and new knowledge that we buy from other countries with whatever, petrodollars or palm oil dollars. Yeah? So I'm quite sure that when God taught us to pray for an increase in knowledge, He did not mean that we just become good customers. He wants us to be creative. To help us pursue knowledge creation, He gave us two most important resources: brains and natural resources. But these undeveloped resources will remain potential and not real assets. The pursuit of knowledge advancement clearly demands a society to turn the two potential assets into real ones. We know too well the popular wisdom that knowledge without practical applications is like a tree without fruits. In fact, the wisdom runs deep into the reality of knowledge. Knowledge grows through the practical applications of existing knowledge. The more we apply, the more of new knowledge we will get. In the Islamic perspective of knowledge creation, both theoretical pursuits and practical applications of knowledge are needed, each serving certain segments of human needs, be it individual or collective and societal. The implication of this knowledge perspective is that knowledge advancement dictates the prevalence of a knowledge culture in which the complementarity of theoretical pursuits and practical application is emphasized. This is my critique against those who say only practical. I know that's not what Tengku Azman meant, because but he wanted to concentrate on practical knowledge for his presentation. But in reality, both theory and practice is needed. If we look at the history of knowledge, we know very well there have been many cases where new knowledge has been produced simply out of theoretical consideration. So do not kill theoretical pursuit altogether in the name of practical implication. Yeah, Dr. Riza know very well. He's a mathematician. theory of groups in the algebra did not find practical application 30 years after people talk about that. Yeah, so you cannot simply have everything must be immediate, practical. No, that's not the way how knowledge grows. Which means that society, for university, please also give some money to people doing theoretical studies. Since one of the main goals of knowledge advancement is the creation of a knowledgeable society, as emphasized in Islam, knowledge dissemination becomes an imperative in any society that is pursuing knowledge advancement. Knowledge dissemination and distribution may be achieved through various means. It now has powerful enablers in the form of technological tools that are easily available to everyone. Democratization of education was raised by Dr. Tukazman. It perhaps provides the best social infrastructure for the realization of an equitable and just knowledge distribution. But the great significance of education to knowledge advancement is not only its capacity to disseminate and distribute knowledge in society, but also its efficacy to consolidate knowledge that has been accumulated by society as a whole, and thereby to sustain society. The idea of knowledge advancement as a factor of empowerment for societal sustainability is important to be given serious attention at all times. I refer to this dimension of knowledge advancement as the consolidation of knowledge through education. This knowledge consolidation includes the critical examination of our intellectual and civilizational heritage. What is in the libraries? What's kept? We should not leave them to rot, but we should study them, of course, critically. Which at this moment, however, that's not the case. That's not the case. In the light of what I have discussed, we can come to this conclusion. There are 4 types of knowledge activities that are relevant to knowledge advancement and that may be regarded as its major dimension. These are discovery of new knowledge through philosophical reflections and other theoretical methods, application, and number 2, applications of existing knowledge, number 3, knowledge dissemination and distribution, and 4, knowledge consolidation. It is primarily in these 4 areas of knowledge activity that an honest and critical examination of the Muslim roles and contributions should be undertaken, especially with respect to their leadership roles, not only within their community, but also in the global community. Now, the second issue. The issue of Muslim leadership in knowledge advancement. There is one important question that needs to be asked and answered. Normally, who are the leaders in knowledge advancement? If we look carefully at the first area of knowledge activity, namely knowledge creation through theoretical reflection, then the leaders are usually the philosophers, the mathematicians, and the natural social scientists. If we look at the second area of knowledge activity, there is knowledge creation through practical application, innovations, and technological invention, then the leaders are mostly the natural scientists, the engineers, and the technologists. If we examine the third area of knowledge activity, namely knowledge dissemination and distribution, then the leaders are usually social scientists, educationists, teachers, information scientists, and journalists. And finally, if we look at the area of knowledge consolidation, then the leaders are mostly academics in universities and colleges, teachers in schools, education policy makers, and curriculum designers. These are the 4 areas of knowledge advancement and their respective group of leaders to which we should pay attention. If we want to know how the whole society is doing in the pursuit of knowledge, it would be a good thing if studies are undertaken to assess the performance and achievements of intellectual leaders of the various areas of knowledge activity and the various professional bodies in terms of the contributions to knowledge advancement. However, prior to undertaking such studies, there is one more important issue that needs to be addressed. This issue pertains how we should measure knowledge advancement itself, which admittedly is rather a delicate issue. So it is just my last comments here. the third and final issue, the criteria of knowledge advancement. I've earlier posed the question: what are the criteria of knowledge advancement that we are using? What are the sources of our criteria? In other words, from where do we get them? And also the philosophical question as a general issue that is relevant to all societies. Are the criteria in question culturally determined, or are they universal? What I have discussed so far has already made references to some of the criteria that we have in mind. For example, the pursuit of beneficial knowledge. Ilmun nafi'un, the pursuit of beneficial knowledge. Another is the pursuit of a knowledgeable society. But if I were to suggest the supreme criterion that subsumes all other criteria, then I would say this: the supreme criteria is none other than knowledge in the service of the higher purposes of the Sharia, in service of maqasid al-Sharia. Just think about the first and the most important of the maqasid, namely the preservation of religion, ad-din. We can see that by maintaining a knowledge system which upholds a classification of knowledge into the fardu ain, the fardu kifayah, the la yanfa, and mubah, or mumkinat, the categories, we are actually helping to preserve religion. Let me explain this point further by taking the example of fardu ain knowledge. As its name suggests, fardu ain knowledge is obligatory or compulsory for everyone in the sight of God and in the sight of society. But the most important fardu ain knowledge is ilmu tawheed, that is knowledge of the unity of God. Religion is the source of this knowledge. Thus, by teaching and disseminating this knowledge, we are actually empowering religion and preserving the first maqasid, which is preservation of ad-din. So, to conclude, to answer the question, what is criteria? I think my answer to that is that the criteria from mixed sources, all right? They are the universal criteria because of the nature of that knowledge in question. In other words, the kind of knowledge that is universal is pursued by all societies, by all countries. The other one is the culturally determined, such as the one determined by religion, by the Sharia. But what Muslim society, what Muslims need today is a comprehensive set of criteria of knowledge advancement that could be applied, that could guide Muslim societies, in a sense also to determine the priorities that should be given to the pursuit and to the pursuit of knowledge. So thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you very much, Dato Professor, for your presentation on the topic, the present state of Muslim leadership in knowledge advancement and critical assessment. Alhamdulillah, by the grace of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we have come to the end of the presentation on the topic, and every panelist have deliberated on the subject matter from various perspectives. And as such, we have a good number of questions from the participants from the YouTube. And let me give priority to some of the pertinent questions, which may be more useful to the entire audience. The first question is, this can be answered by any of the panelists. Could the panel highlight the enablers as well as the inhibitors of progressive Muslim leadership in knowledge advancement? Let me repeat the question. Could the panel highlight the enablers as well as inhibitors of progressive Muslim leadership in knowledge advancement? Anyone from the experts? Maybe Yang Mahamulia, Tunku, Would you like to answer this question?
Yes, I can start. Thank you,
Yes,
Chairman.
Tunku. Yes, Tunku, please. Welcome.
Yeah, question is very good one. What are the enablers and inhibitors of knowledge advancement?
True.
I think we have covered that quite well. I always believe actually to drive anything is people, but not just people as such, but people organized, structured. So when we look at that, then of course, what enables a knowledge society? First of all, is the will of people to learn. Of course, when they want to learn, some must also have the will in all societies. For example, if you look at again to previous thing, the House of Wisdom in Baghdad many years ago, leadership came from the Caliphate, the political process. And of course, the Caliphate provided the framework, the legal framework, you would say, even incentives, right? So there is a legend, very important legend that the Caliphate would buy books in exchange with the weight in gold. That's a sort of value you put to knowledge. You bring a book that we don't have, we will pay you the same weight in gold. Would you imagine something like that happening today? So these are the sorts of cultural elements that make the system work. But of course, ultimately, is the ability to be learners, to do research. And look at again the House of Wisdom when they did it, the culture of openness. For example, it is known that the number 0, in the West they call it Arabic numerals. But in reality, the Arabs call it Indian numbers. Where did the number 0 come from? From Hindu priests. So there were Hindu priests that were coming to work in the House of Wisdom. The same thing happened in other fields of endeavor. You look at the findings of the chemists of that period, those who work on the so-called alchemy, many of them were not Muslims at all. They are non-Muslims. And certainly that was an open collaborative system, you call it, and a global one to boot. So these are things that enable culture, civilizational attitude towards the creation of new knowledge. That has happened in the past, and I don't think we should question why it shouldn't happen again in the present times. And what are inhibitors? There are plenty of inhibitors. Let me just quote from the late Ahmad Zuhail, who got a Nobel Prize. He gave a talk right here in Kuala Lumpur. I was listening intently to him. He comes from a certain country, I won't mention the country, but he was in Caltech. He was doing very, very well. He was good at both physics and chemistry. So he was invited back to his country. Then said he couldn't survive. He said, okay, in where I work in Caltech, they give me sufficient money and ask no questions. In the country that he was invited back to, they gave him a little bit of money and asked a lot of questions. In other words, he said, they don't trust me. They start with foundation of, I need to ask you many questions because I cannot trust you. Right? So this is a very important word. Trust is very important. You must have trust in people, right? And when you have that sort of, call it unconducive environment, how can you discover new knowledge? So that happens everywhere, by the way. I'm not saying that the country is guilty on its own, but it happens here too. It happens probably in many, many other countries. So there are very few countries that respect knowledge and knowledgeable people very, very highly. So these are basically the inhibitors. So I can speak about other inhibitors, of course, but this is, I would like to look at the value and the mindset, the attitudes of people. That's what drives things, either to enable development of new knowledge or otherwise. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. Dato. Thank you. Would anybody?
Yes,
yes, Dato, please.
just to complement what Dato Tengku Azman said, well, certainly as an enabler, we need good quality education. We need good quality education. This education needs to be improved from time to time. We need to check its effectiveness, its efficacy, especially in the field of knowledge such as the science and and technology. I think the point is we should not stop at one level and then becomes stagnant. You should. So my point is progressively the education should be improving its quality. Then of course the support, basically the support of the what Dr. Tuku mentioned with regard to Baitul Hikmah, the kind of patronization of knowledge. I think patronization of knowledge remains always a very, very important enabler. The patrons who play the role of the patrons, yes, they can change. Before it used to be rulers and princes and so on. Now in modern times, the private sector and so on. But the point is, we should have enough people to patronize knowledge activities. Another, of course, is question of I think the people who are involved in the knowledge agenda should be given more support, more respect. I think that is very, very important thing. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Dato, for your response. Let me move on to the second question. Dear professors, technology does not cause any harm, rather those who run it. The question is, what is the role of Muslim leaders in education to provide Tawhidic orientation instead of technology one? Any panelist can answer.
It's not quite clear, the last one.
Okay, let me read again, Dato. Dear professors, technology does not cause any harm, rather those who run it. What is the role of Muslim leaders in education to provide Tawhidic orientation instead of technology orientation?
If I may respond, I mean, I don't think it is absolutely correct to say that technology has no harm. Yeah? It depends on the form of technology. Yeah? There is a kind of technology on the how you use it. Yes, but you cannot say, for example, let's say take for example biological weapon. All right, you cannot say that biological weapon technology is not harmful, except it depends on how you use it. There's no such thing as the halal way of doing or using biological weapon. You know, so in other words, there are forms of technology that have been created that can only be meant for harmful purposes. But there is, of course, is small. Part of the entire range of the technology, which is very. But my point is just to clarify, to respond to that question. But now you mentioned about the Tawhidi. I mean, yes. Yes. When I mentioned the importance of ilmu Tawhid, all right. Now this knowledge cannot be. It's not a subject that you teach only for 1 year in school, and later on you don't have to know. This knowledge of Tawhid, if we understand its nature, is needed at all times. It's all time, and therefore this knowledge has to be cultivated, has to be taught in an effective way right from the beginning of education. So as we go through the ladder of education, the process, then we learn more and more about the knowledge, because that knowledge is not limited. Yeah? So I think simply in the context of our discussion, that knowledge is important for the advancement of knowledge, and therefore it should be taught. My critique is that this is the knowledge, the subject that is quite ignored, in a sense, not given serious attention by religious teachers. All right, whereas it is the mother. Ilmu Tawhid is the mother of all knowledge. It generates other branches of knowledge. But we are not giving the due attention to this knowledge in our curriculum and in the way we teach the subject.
Okay, thank you, Dato, for your answer. And let me go to another question. This is directly addressed to Dato Sri Prof. Zaleha. How Islamic is the Muslim leadership? Is a question we Muslims and even many non-Muslims raise it. Dear Prof, can you explain further this why and how? Dato Sri, this is directly
Yes.
to
Am I
you by
muted?
the
Can I
speaker.
answer now? Can you hear me?
Okay, we hear you, Dato Sri. Yes.
All right. If I can go back in history, again, we refer to the House of Knowledge, the Baitul Hikmah. All knowledge there were not just Islamic knowledge. They were also knowledge gained from the Greeks, of which the knowledge were in Latin. And then it was translated into Arabic and it was paid in gold. As mentioned by Datuk Tengku, it was paid in gold. Because the Caliphate at that time emphasized knowledge. It did not say Islamic knowledge, to the point that the priest, this is the history of the legal history, yeah? The priest from England went all the way to Baghdad to study Islamic law, which were translated into Latin, and from Greeks, from Latin to Arabic. So the activity were very rich in translations. So when the question is to what extent the knowledge is Islamic or the leaders are Islamic, right? We refer back to what has been stated by Prof. Usman. We talk about knowledge, and again, the issue of Islamization of knowledge. Right? To the point that I suspect when I studied the legal history of canon law, what is canon? Canon law, maybe it comes from the word kanun. Kanun, the Arabic canon. Codification of laws. What we could see is there are knowledge that comes from the Greek, which are consistent with Islamic knowledge, right? Which are accepted as knowledge. I think we have to have a long discussion on Islamization of knowledge, and this part is on Islamization of knowledge itself and the history of it. We could go into the legal history of it, but what I can and sure of is it is not just knowledge from the Quran, but also the application of the knowledge and how the Muslims studied knowledge from the Greeks. As well. So from there, whatever knowledge which are accepted are taken in, which are in line, because the Quran is a guide. It doesn't contain everything. Otherwise, it would be very big. It's a big book. And if I could say, the enabler is the Caliphate, the main enabler. That's why it's leading, Muslims leading. If you don't have the enabler, it will not happen. You can perhaps under democratization of knowledge or what we call bottom up. But I think bottom up is less effective than top down. But to have down is to have uh, people who appreciates knowledge, people who are knowledgeable, people who really affiliate to knowledge and understand the impact of knowledge in the society. I will stop at that because I'm going into the area of Prof. Osman Bakar here. I'm just like relating my experience when I studied the legal history of canon law to show that it need not necessarily be Islamic, quote unquote, Islamic knowledge, because then we have to dissect the meaning of Islamic knowledge, the same as we dissected whether this is a Muslim society or an Islamic society.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Sri, for your explanation. This question is directed to Prof. Dr. Riza. The writer says, my question is to the second speaker, Dr. Riza. Malaysia is leading in the Islamic economy for 8 years. What is the impact of Malaysia's leadership in this area on the Muslim world? Let me repeat. Malaysia is leading in the Islamic economy for 8 years. What is the impact of Malaysia's leadership in this area on the Muslim world?
Thank you, Prof. Amin, and to the person who's asking this question. So, alhamdulillah, since Malaysia has been leading in this sector, particularly in the Islamic economy, and it seems that we've been doing it for many, many years. So I think to make it brief, Malaysia is now recognized not only by the Muslim countries, but also the whole world. Okay, we heard, for example, Dr. Suri Zaliha mentioned the Japanese, they engaged us, IUM, at one point, many years before the Olympics they are going to host, because they need some ideas on how to leverage on this particular economy. Okay, similarly with the South Koreans. So they introduced the concept of Muslim-friendly kind of things instead of Sharia compliant, Muslim-friendly. So these kind of things, you see, they learn from us and we also learn from them. Okay, so it's not saying that only Muslim countries are benefiting, but we see that non-Muslim countries are also benefiting. So that's my short answer.
Okay. Thank you, Dato, for your answer. This question is directed to both Tunku Prof. Azman and Prof. Dato Dr. Riza. I would like to ask about the measurement of technological progress. Is it following global trends, or are we developing our own, or a combination of both? Thank you.
Can you repeat, please?
Let me repeat.
Yeah.
I would like to ask about the measurement of technological progress. Is it following the global trends, or are we developing our own, or a combination of both?
Okay, let me start. Measurement of technological progress. I have not seen any Malaysian work that's unique to Malaysia. I'm not saying that it shouldn't be done, but I don't understand enough of the benefits of such an exercise. But certainly, we are measuring technological progress in many ways using international benchmarks. There's so many of them. Yeah, you can mention, for example, the World Economic Forum, the Global, what do you call this, Competitiveness Index. There's also the GII, Innovation Index, World Bank, OECD, etc., etc. There's so many ways of measuring progress. However, having said that, it's important to note that they all suffer from one weakness. There is a separation from the creator of knowledge. This is the weakness. So we need to have our own, which measures how close we are to fulfilling our deen. So I have presented some ideas myself on how to use maqasid, Sharia, in order to actually figure out what to do in all the 5 areas. In fact, I have developed a systems diagram to indicate that with feedback loops. So these are things that we can all do. I'm not saying that my view is correct or the best, not at all. I'm just trying based on my own thinking process. Thank you.
Thank you, Tunku. Prof. Dato' Riza, would you like to add?
Well, I think when we look into even the university world rankings, see, for example, the one that we using in Malaysia by many universities is the QS world ranking. So people have been asking the similar question: do we come up with an Islamic, world ranking kind of things? So I think, as Tunku Azman said, whatever you want to do, I think at the end of the thing, of the exercise, we need to scrutinize whether it is beneficial to mankind, number one. And then, it should be the first one instead should be, are we, through this knowledge, bringing ourselves closer to the Creator? So these 2 things to me are very essential to answer these kind of questions.
Okay, thank you, Dato', for your response.
Prof?
Yes, Dato', please.
I would like to raise this issue. Maybe Dato' Tunku Azman and Dato' Riza can have more knowledge about this. But I'm quite aware of recent development. More than a decade ago or so. In other words, kind of a shift in the evaluating the impact of technology on the environment. So in other words, there's one area where there has been a shift in thinking. Perhaps in other words, before, say 30 years ago, 40 years ago, people give little attention to the link between forms of technology and environmental impact. But now the sensitivity is growing. In other words, maybe there are certain parameters, certain things that we did not take into account last time when we invent technology, because there's an idea that the role of technology is just to conquer nature, to let nature to submit itself to the wishes of human. But now this is different thinking. So maybe Tunku you can.
Yes,
just that.
I agree with you. There is a trend, and only this year, 2021, that trend has at least produced one concrete result. There is a report by Professor Das Gupta, who's a professor of economics in Cambridge. He was actually commissioned by the British government to come up with a report based on maybe 20 or 30 years of work in economics of sustainability. He comes up with a report you can get from the web to show that actually we have been guilty, humankind has been guilty for centuries now for not accounting the cost of taking services from nature and the cost of putting our toxic materials back into nature. He says that if you do proper economics and account for these things, then you begin to see the world is actually finite. You cannot continue to take services at will as if nature is an bottomless well, and you cannot keep throwing into the well all your dirt and filth. So this idea is very, very new, by the way, in sense of really through economic work with all the mathematics involved. Anybody who's an economist listening can please look at the Das Gupta report. If we do this on a global scale, then we are likely to actually create a more sustainable world. This is only one movement that I'm aware of, but there could be others. Of course, when I was a student many years ago, the Club of Rome published this report, The Limits of Growth. That was 1971, I believe. I still have the book, and it was actually a simulation of how the world, our biosphere could get so polluted because of the way that we manage our, call it, production processes. So this is 50 years ago. And until today, there's been no movement to actually recognize this fact and do something about it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Allow me to also add here, if
Yes,
you don't mind, Prof. Sami. I think this is where the crux of the matter lies, which is the Muslim leadership in the advancement of knowledge. You see, when we talk about Muslim leadership in advancement of knowledge here, we can see that an inventor or innovator should be in harmony with the phrase Rahmatan lil Alamin. You see? So that's why I believe if we look hindsight, we can see the golden age of the Islamic civilization. The leaders then were not just talking about making progress or advancement in terms of societal well-being, but to live in harmony with the whole universe. Okay? Because Allah also described that everything that He created, that they are making supplications, they are glorifying Allah, and therefore all these are in harmony with whatever we do. But being human beings, we cannot hear what they are saying. We don't understand the tasbih. And that's why if we just leave it to those who don't understand this, okay, we can see that the several industrial revolution has now accumulated the baggage, for example, in terms of pollution and what have you today. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dato. The next question is there any good example in current Muslim leadership in knowledge advancement that can be used as a case study? Let me repeat. Is there any good example in current Muslim leadership in knowledge advancement that can be used as a case study? Any panelist can answer. Maybe we can begin with Dato, Prof. Osman.
Well, I will tell to the questioner, the question, our panelists, I mean, you should study them. You should study Dato Tunku Azman, what his leadership role has been over the years, what Dr. Riza, what Professor Zaleha. So in fact, the people whom we assemble here in our panel, they are the leaders. They are the leaders.
Relevant answer.
As far as knowledge advancement in Malaysia, you can find some more. But they are already. You please study them.
Okay, thank you, Doctor. Thank you, Dato. Okay, let me go to the next question.
Can I add on?
Yes, Dato. Yes, Dato Sri.
Prof. Osman highlighted individuals, but there are, I would say, organizations or universities that are in the forefront. For example, I think in Saudi, there's one university. Unfortunately, they have appointed, fortunately or unfortunately, again, I will say, the pull factor is a professor from Singapore to be the vice chancellor of, I think if I'm not mistaken, the Petroleum University. We were studying and trying to emulate them, but we can't, because when I say we means IIUN, because they have lots of financial backing on research. So we have to identify universities in the Muslim world that they are in the forefront, especially when their funding on research is very strong, right? So these are like identifying research institutes that are in the forefront. I did mention about the UK Foundation on Health. I can't remember. I think it's another is Rockefeller Health Foundation. You know, in 1 year they could like work together with policymakers on 160 projects. 160 projects with strong backings from the government. So if our government were to sponsor projects where each professor will be the principal investigator, let's say if each university they have 50 professors and each professors play their role, I think we can get a good quantity of research, and from there we can get quality as well, because we're talking about intra, and multidisciplinary research. So if we were to get individual, we can start off with individual investigators, and then we can go into groups. I guess that will play as a model for researchers for the Muslim world. Malaysia can play that role, or they can team up with, for example, Turkey or Saudi Arabia under OIC, perhaps. I don't know. I am just proposing some ideas that we can forge leadership ahead in this particular area, or we can divide areas as well. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Sri. This question is directed to Dr. Prof. Usman Bakar. Can the Islamic synthesis approach be an alternative framework for current knowledge advancement in the Islamic world and the world at large? Let me repeat. Can the Islamic synthesis approach be an alternative framework for current knowledge advancement in the Islamic world and the world at large?
Well, certainly the idea of synthesis as a means of integrating different kinds of knowledge that have been produced by the world, that is a very, very pertinent, very useful thing. That should be pursued. In other words, and I have been complaining in my articles and my talk, for example, many people, many Muslims do not really see the value of the synthesis methodology as a means of creating new knowledge, right? In other words, new knowledge is obtained not only through analysis, but also through synthesis. You know, in the past, all the great Muslim thinkers, they perform synthesis on various scales, because they encounter knowledge from Greece, from the Greek, from the Persians, from the Indian. So in other words, they want to make sense out of the so many currents of thought that entered into the world of Islam. All right. So today, in other words, it is the role of Muslim academics, Muslim scholars, all right, to try various, of course, to start maybe at lower level first, a lower level of synthesis. But the point is, the knowledge produced by the West, most of them are useful knowledge, all right? So, but we have to synthesize the knowledge that the West has produced, or China has produced, or Russia has produced, with the knowledge from our own tradition, because many of the knowledge that is kept in the libraries that I was talking about, that potential but not real knowledge, that we can do that. So, but this has to be put on the agenda, must be put on the agenda of advancement of knowledge, or knowledge advancement. So the answer is yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, Prof. Thank you very much for your answer. Okay, let me just put before you this question. This can be answered by any of the panelists. Imam Al-Ghazali has defined useful knowledge. today with the COVID-19 pandemic and the vaccine paradox is a new category of abusive knowledge prevalent. Let me repeat. Imam Al-Ghazali has defined useful knowledge. But today, with the COVID-19 pandemic and the vaccine paradox, is a new category of abusive knowledge prevalent. Dato, please.
No, I don't understand what you mean by abusive knowledge.
Yeah. Is this abusive knowledge?
Abuse of knowledge?
He says abusive, quote unquote, abusive knowledge prevalent.
It's very difficult to answer because we don't understand what you mean by abusive knowledge. But the only thing I can comment is that since you mentioned Al-Ghazali, knowledge is growing, keep on growing. Therefore, the list of useful knowledge during Al-Ghazali's time cannot be the same as the list today, right? Because the knowledge, the list will not be becoming, it keeps on longer, not shorter. That is very important. Yeah. Of course, that is the task of the Muslim academy scholars and so on, to look at all that mushrooming of new knowledge and examine that from the perspective of Islamic epistemology. That is our job. That's task. Right? The question of there'll be new innovative knowledge coming from the West because they are busier than us. They are working harder than us in trying to find solutions to the problems that humanity is facing. So I think that's important for us to take note of that. Yeah, at the moment, we are not the producers. Really, we are not the creators of new knowledge. Yes, we could create, but it's not as much as the West. We have to accept that fact.
Can I contribute to that discussion?
Yes, Tunku, please, Tunkas.
Yes, I'm trying to interpret the question, so I hope you will bear with me. I see one abuse of knowledge, which is the protection of intellectual property. And during the COVID-19 crisis, you can see there have been attempts to open up the IP so that all countries can produce so-called patented technology, but this has been resisted by several parties, let's put it that way. So the idea of IP has been going on for a long time. During the British, kingdom, the British monarchy used to actually issue, rights to do this and that, and that's the beginning of IP. However, there is now a trend to have IP open. I mentioned already earlier the internet. The internet protocol was not patented. It could have been. It's made open. And look what happened to the world. The same thing with web. Tim Berners-Lee, who was then in CERN, created the web technology. He didn't patent it. He could have. Same thing with so many others that we know of. For example, the operating system called Linux is an open source. And under open source, you find now thousands and thousands of software which are actually open, not protected. To me, I think it's a very important word to use, the word risky. Some people think of risky only as food or money, wealth. What about knowledge? Knowledge is also risky. And God gave us risky so that we can spend it for others. We must share it. So I believe that actually we have to look at knowledge in the same light, that it is God-given, we must share it openly. Of course, I'm not saying that we give it such giveaways in such a way that we cannot derive economic value. But look at, say, Linux. The operating system is made available to all, but when you offer services, you can charge. You can see that, right? So there are differences. So it's how you think of the business model. It is not a matter of principle. Principally, you must make it open, therefore everybody will benefit. So this is what I call beneficial knowledge. Thank you.
So this means, Dato, we should review the concept of patenting and intellectual property rights.
Exactly.
Maybe we can have one webinar on this theme, inshallah.
Indeed. Thank you very much.
The last question, since our time is over, is do you think literalist theology has stagnated knowledge advancement in the Muslim world. Do you think literalist theology has stagnated knowledge advancement in the Muslim world? I think we should start with the Dato' Prof. Usman Bakar. Can you unmute Dato', please?
Sorry. Yes, I'm saying that it looks like that the question has to be interpreted. What is meant by literalist theology? Well, I mean, normally we the word literalist, I mean, is used by people to refer to Muslims who understand religion or who understand the Quran in a very, very literal way. It's as if there is only one meaning, literal meaning, and has no other meaning. So yes, in that sense, that kind of understanding the teachings of the Quran, of Islam, will certainly contribute to the advancement of knowledge, because for the advancement of knowledge we need an open, a more open understanding. Well, the actual meaning of the Quran is wider, is broader, deeper than what some of the literalists think it is. I think basically here is a gap. It's a gap in the understanding of the religion itself. Yeah. So that much I can, and as a brief response to the question, the answer, if that is what you mean by literalist theology, then the answer, yes, it prohibits the advancement of the understanding of Islam itself, and more generally, that is a check on the growth of knowledge, because knowledge needs an open mind, and based on correct methodologies, as found in Islamic epistemology itself. And the one, the epistemology that Muslims develop over the centuries, the great majority of them are counter to the literalist view. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dato', for your response. Is there any other panelists who would like to add? Any other panelists would like to contribute further? Okay, fine. Okay, if this is the case, we have, alhamdulillah, by the grace of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, come to an end of this today's webinar, which has been very useful, fruitful, and it has communicated a lot of new information to our respected audience. As this is the norm in our institute, we will have another webinar again in the 3rd or the 4th week of June, inshallah. We will invite the participants as well as the audience to attend that particular webinar. And the ISTAC has been organizing such webinars, and the tradition of the organizing a series of webinars will continue, inshallah. With this, let me take this opportunity to thank once again Tunku Dato' Dr. Muhammad Azman Sharifuddin Tunku Ibrahim, Professor Dato' Dr. Muhammad Riza bin Wahyuddin, Professor Dato' Sri Dr. Zaleha bin Kamaruddin, Professor Emeritus Dato' Dr. Usman Bakar, and all other participants participants in this webinar. On behalf of ISTAC and IOM, again, I thank you once again. Inshallah, we look forward to your paper, whether it is a short paper or a long paper. We greatly appreciate. Please give your thoughts in writing so that ISTAC will compile and then publish it either in our journal or as a separate monograph. So once again, I thank you all very much. Tunku, Azman, Dato Prof. Riza, Dato Sri Zaleha, Dato Prof. Usman Bakar, and all those who have contributed to the success of this webinar. With this, may I end with your permission. Wabillah taufiq wal hidayah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Ribuan, terima kasih.
Assalamualaikum.
Walaikum salam wa rahmatullahi.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Thank you very much, Dato. Thank you, Tunku. Thank you, Dato Sir. Thank you, Prof. Dato Usman. Inshallah, we look forward to other programs, inshallah, in the future.
Inshallah.
Inshallah.
La ilaha illallah.